David, thank you. Well, those storms were also causing some concern for people on the grounds at EAA AirVenture, where some visitors camp out. Jason Zimmerman is live in Oshkosh, where some people are taking shelter. Jason.
At least we just moved under a big tent here on the EAA grounds because of the possibility of severe storms passing over us within the next several minutes. So far that hasn't happened. A lot of people out here just having a good time gathering at a set-up bar, and there's even a band playing right around the corner. On a more positive note, the weather this afternoon could not have been more perfect for the very first air show of the week. From the flight line at AirVenture, it's a sight to see as people from across the world gather to watch some of the best pilots around perform stunts and fly in formation. Many of the planes in Monday's air show were former U.S. Air Force.
The jets that just came through, that's always one of my favorites, of course. And then you'll go over to the vintage aircraft, and then you just fall in love over and over again. That's just what it is. That's AirVenture. That's Oshkosh.
The air shows each afternoon are a highlight for the hundreds of thousands of people on the EAA grounds. Many are repeat visitors, but for others, it's a bucket list item. First time here, is it living up to expectations?
Well, exceeding expectations. You know, we walked through a C-5 Galaxy over here. It's the largest aircraft in the U.S. military fleet. I never expected to see one up close.
The thing that's just hard to visualize is the mass number of people and airplanes and everybody that brought their RVs and campers in. It's just everywhere you look, there's people that are serious about airplanes and just want to be here.
This year's event also placing a special emphasis on military planes as a nod to the country's 250th celebration. Just about every branch had its spot.
It's wonderful to see that our defense department, that our military is being represented in a more substantial way. Hopefully people can appreciate more what they do for us.
There's also a concert tonight, and I'm not talking about the one right behind me where you see all the people. This one was actually involving a pretty big name. We'll have a lot more on that coming up in just a few minutes, a little bit later on in the show. Reporting live in Oshkosh, Jason Zimmerman, Action 2 News.